Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cowboys Overtime here on StarTelegram.com, brought to you by the wonderful people at Window Nation. I am Fort Worth Star Telegram columnist Mac Engel, and I'm joined by my good friend, Mr. Clarence E. Hill Jr. Clarence, before we get into this week's topic, I want to give everybody who's watching a bit of a warning. My dog is on the other side of the camera here. She's kind of going nuts. So if she loses her stuff, like if somebody walks down the street, she might lose her stuff. So we could have an extra additional soundtrack that I wasn't kind of anticipating, but to make it a little bit more fun, because what wasn't fun was the Dallas Cowboys season-ending loss. For the second consecutive year, the Cowboys season ends in the playoffs against the San Francisco 49ers. But unlike with Dak Prescott running out the clock unintentionally at home in Arlington against the 49ers, this time he shot his, I don't even know, shot his foot, shot his face, just awful in the season-ending loss at San Francisco, which actually played in Santa Clara. Cowboys lose in the divisional round again, 19-12. Clarence, before we get into the topics, I want to ask you, are you surprised?
I mean, I've seen this movie before. Old Yeller dies. I mean, I know you kids don't know who Old Yeller is. I'm just going to tell you, Old Yeller dies at the end of the movie, okay? I've seen it. I mean, goodness, I've had a front row seat to the Cowboys' season-ending defeats well before the Super Bowl since 1996. I've seen every one of them. I was there at every playoff loss since the last Super Bowl title in 1995. I did not go to the Super Bowl in 1995. I went to the championship game in 1995. I covered that. Then I go to the Super Bowl. I started covering the Cowboys in 1996, basically, and I was at and watched every playoff loss, division playoffs, wild card playoffs. They've been to playoffs 12 times, 5 in the wild card round. 5 losses wild card round, 7 losses in the divisional round. I've seen them all.
I think because it's the playoffs and, the NFL teams are so close, I think going into that game, a lot of people convinced themselves that the Cowboys could pull it off for purely justifiable reasons, starting with the San Francisco 49ers were starting a rookie 7th-round pick quarterback who was their third-string quarterback. But were we fooling ourselves that this Cowboys team could beat that San Francisco team?
Well, and that's just it. I mean, we're going to get into the Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott needs to be better. He was, the primary reason, if you want to go with his turnovers, why they lost the game. But, the San Francisco 49ers had a better overall team.
They did.
The edge the Cowboys had, that they supposedly had, was their quarterback. But it wasn't enough to overcome San Francisco having a better team, better scheme, better coaching staff, all those other things, home field advantage, and we, and it's excuses, but rest, preparation, from playing on Saturday to them playing on Monday because it's been a short week. All the other edges were in San Francisco's favor, not to mention they had a better season. They had a better defense. All of those things, in their advantage, and you hope that Dak Prescott, could be the difference maker to overcome the other areas where the Cowboys were not as good and strong as the 49ers. In the end, it wasn't enough, and Dak Prescott continued his mistake-prone ways that he had during the season with the 2 interceptions. But the 49ers had a better football team.
They did, and let's get into it. Our first topic is, I wrote it, you said it, bottom line is Dak Prescott has to be better. In the game against San Francisco, he was 23 of 37 passing for a pedestrian 206 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 killer interceptions, and just an incredibly anemic 63.6 passer rating. This is coming off of a playoff performance in Tampa Bay less than a week ago, where he played maybe the best game of his career, if not certainly his best playoff game, but maybe the best game of his career, where he tore apart Tampa Bay. Now, you said it, San Francisco is a lot better than Tampa Bay, but Clarence, you've covered, I think every one of Dak's starts as a pro.
Yeah.
I've been to most of them. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe how bad he was. And I've gone back and I've watched a fair amount of those games and a fair amount of that game and watched a lot of his passes. He looks so average. He just looks so average at this point. Do you think he's in his own head?
I mean, I think that the notion that Dak Prescott, because he's a $40 million quarterback, that he's good enough to uplift lesser areas of the team, I think that's folly. I mean, they paid him $40 million because that's the going rate for quarterbacks. Yep. He's a leader, but there's nothing that Dak does that's otherworldly special. He doesn't have a great arm. He doesn't have a great athleticism. He's a leader. He's a good guy. He gets everybody ready to play. He knows what to do with the offense, but he's not a guy that elevates subpar areas of the team. And I think that the problem here, he's aggressive. He was trying to elevate. He was trying to do too much. He was trying to, certainly he only trusted CeeDee Lamb. He was trying to force the ball to CeeDee Lamb. Every time he throws the ball to somebody else, it gets intercepted or whatever. So there's a lot of things going on. The notion that, I don't buy into the notion that they can't win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott, because there's a good chance that the Eagles are going to go to the Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts and the 49ers are going to go to the Super Bowl with Brock Purdy, and they're not elite quarterback, but they have better teams around them.
Yep.
So the notion that, you can't get to that, that's not true. That's
That's
patently false. But Dak Prescott has to go back to the guy who takes care of the football. And it's interesting because for the first 6 years of his career, Dak was not a quarterback to turn the ball over.
No,
it's only this year when the Cowboys said, Dak, we need you to be Aaron Rodgers. We need you to uplift.
Well, wait a minute. Let me cut. Hang on. Do you think? Wait a minute, Claire.
Turnover quarterback.
Okay. Do you think they said that, or he felt like he needed to be, because the reality of it is Michael Gallup's not the same guy since he got hurt? And hang on. Michael Gallup's just is a pretty nice receiver.
He's a nice guy.
Got rid of Amari Cooper. Tony Pollard was a weapon. They overpaid Dalton Schultz. They probably going to get stuck and overpay him again with a franchise tag for the second consecutive year.
We'll
get into that later. But who were his options? I mean,
I agree. But that's my point, is that, but they did say that. Stephen Jones said that to me in the offseason when we were quizzing him at the owners' meeting last May, every time we talked to them, because we talked about the team being less talented. I've talked since the end of the season that the Cowboys in March was not as talented as the Cowboys that ended the season against San Francisco, because they got rid of Mark Cooper, because they lost CeeDee Lamb. They brought in James Washington. The team was not as talented, was not explosive. Everybody, Stevie Wonders, we all saw that. Stephen Jones said that, yes, we believe Dak Prescott can make up for that. So they said it, had to believe it or think it or whatever else. So that played a role in it. But yes.
Wait a minute. So they go out. We all said it. They're not as talented. They're not as good. They didn't make enough necessary upgrades to be better than what they were last season, which was 12-5 in 2021. And then they go out against in theory, a harder schedule, because you won 12 games the season before, and they went 12. Pardon?
Allegedly inferior schedule.
Oh, you're right. Okay, but then they went 12-5 again. My thought is both sides were right. Cowboys can sit there and tell themselves, no, we were right. We went 12-5. We won 10. We did things this franchise hasn't done in 15 to 25 years. You can make that argument. No, and to your point, you were dead on right, because they finished exactly where they were from a season ago, which is not good enough to beat the San Francisco 49ers. Cowboys had a really good season. They really did. You go 12-5. There's 7 teams in the NFL.
No question about that.
Yeah, there were 7 teams in the NFL that finished with 12 or more wins in 2022. The Cowboys were one of those 7. And if you look where they finished, they should have lost in the divisional round. They weren't better than San Francisco. They weren't better than Philadelphia. And although they beat them once, but they weren't better than Philadelphia. And they were better than Minnesota, because they kicked their butt in Minneapolis 2 months ago. That's it. They weren't better than Buffalo, not better than Cincinnati. They're not better than Kansas City. We know that they finished where they should. So I think the Cowboys, when they look back at their offseason last year, Clarence, could say, no, we did we were pretty much right. You know, they let go of Randy Gregory. Dorrance Armstrong had a nice season. They let go of some other guys. They filled in. Tony Pollard had a great year. He really did. But overall, you're right too. Where did they finish? Exact same spot where they were a year ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know what, like, Dak Prescott's 29. He started 97 career NFL games. This is who he is. He's really good. He's good enough, but you have got to put better weapons around him. To think that James Washington, Noah Brown, Jalen Tolbert, that's the dumbest thing ever. That they're going to make this team better and get beyond the divisional round is insane. Question is, do you think they've got enough to move on, and it's just a matter of a couple plays here and there, and then they'll get to the Super Bowl?
No, they know they have to get better, and we'll talk about what they need to do to get better and to take the next step. You know, later on in the show. But they have to get better, and Dak Prescott has to get back to being Dak Prescott and not turn the ball over, making smarter decisions. He knows that, and you again, you can say what you want about his ceiling and where he is, and he may not get better, but we know he can be better, in the sense that we know he's not a turnover quarterback.
God,
we know he's not a guy. That's not who he has been. So if you get back to who he was, he doesn't necessarily have to get better. He just has to be better than he was this year.
Speaking of one guy who's probably not going to get any better because of age, as we move on to our second topic here on Cowboys Overtime, sponsored by Window Nation, Zeke Elliott. Zeke Elliott came into the NFL as the 4th overall pick of the Dallas Cowboys in the 2016 NFL Draft. In that same draft class was Dak Prescott, who was a 4th-round pick. And on Sunday in San Francisco, it looked apparent that we are at the end of the Zeke Elliott time with the Dallas Cowboys. Clarence, do you think we have seen the final days of Zeke Elliott as a Cowboy?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know, and I've always known that Zeke was willing to take a pay cut to stay with the Cowboys. And, certainly they're not going to bring him back in his current salary. But I know he's willing to take a pay cut, and there's a lot of sentiment to him wanting to be here. His dad has moved here. His sister's at SMU Law School. His mother's trying to move here. The whole family is trying to move to Dallas, and so he wants to stay. This is his home base, and certainly, he is, as Zach Martin said, epitome of this football team and his attitude and, his work ethic and all the other stuff, but production matters. And I know he would take a pay cut. I think there's some pride in him and how far that cut would be. I don't know what you pay Zeke to come back.
My question is, Clarence, Tony Pollard suffered a broken fibula. He's in a contract. His contract is up. Clearly, he was the better player by far. And who knows how that game goes if he does not suffer that injury in the first half. But Zeke became option number 1. 10 carries, 26 yards, 2 catches, 7 yards. He had a drop inside the red zone that darn near was an interception. Career rushing lows, everything was career lows except short yardage, goal line situations where he proved to be still very effective, scored 12 touchdowns. Clarence, even if he takes a substantial, let's just say he takes the veteran minimum salary, which he won't, but let's just say he does. My question for you is, why would the Cowboys want him back if this is what he can do?
Right, and we have to suspend the charade. We got to start Zeke because, Zeke was a 2-time rushing champion. Tony Pollard is the featured best back on the team. He's the one who should be starting and going out there with offense first. And certainly, Zeke and Tony Pollard decisions go hand in hand to a certain extent. The Cowboys are going to at least probably, if Tony Pollard gets through this injury and this rehab and they're at least going to probably put the franchise tag on, which is going to be $10.1 million, which is pretty much what Zeke is supposed to make next year. There's no way they're paying both of them, that contract. And I don't know. And you can't cut Zeke from 10 to 7 because you're not paying that position $17 million. You're certainly not going to do that. So you have to take Zeke under that. But yeah, I mean, I just don't know what number and what role he could have, especially when most likely you could draft a running back in April. I mean, Mel Kiper's already projecting the Cowboys taking Bijan Robinson from Texas with their number 1 pick.
Did they do that again? I know, I saw that. Do you think they would really do that? I mean, Bijan's great talent. Do you think they would do that?
I mean, why not? I mean, they need weapons on offense, and certainly you're getting him certainly is the first round pick, but he's getting a rookie salary for 5 years. I mean, the thing that we've learned about how they use running backs, use them up and spit them out. Use them up on their rookie deal and spit them out. Get him for 5 years and run him into the ground, get the best out of him. Because, running backs are at their best when they're younger.
Sure.
That's when you use them up and you max them out when they're not making any money. And then when they prove they're great and they have to make money, you move on from them. I mean,
well, that's what the Cowboys didn't do with Zeke. And Zeke,
no,
at the direction of his agent, wisely held out, got a monster second deal. And
which is one reason why you're not giving Tony Pollard a multi-year deal. He's already 4 or 5 years in. You do him year to year. I mean, and so if you draft a running back that you got for 3 or 4 or 5 years, then it kind of works hand in hand. But I know Zeke wants to stay. I know Jerry, and there's a sentiment within the organization to keep him because they like what he brings, they like his attitude and all the other stuff. But it's a shame. It's a shame of his last play with the Cowboys was at center, getting blown up at center. But that speaks to his explosiveness, speak to how they use him and what they expect from him right now. They that's the position they had him in, on the supposedly game winning lateral play to start that play. And that's just a shame.
Nope, I agree. We got more to talk about here on Cowboys Overtime. But first, a word from the great people at Window Nation.
Window Nation, the star of window replacement and proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys, can help you fill the house this season with savings. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free, and make no payments and pay no interest until 2025. Fill your house for a customized authentic Dallas Cowboys jersey while supplies last. You could even help fill the Cowboys house and win tickets to a game. Visit windownation.com/Cowboys now for details. Call 866-95-NATION. Window Nation, proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
All right, thank you, Window Nation. That's Clarence E. Hill Jr. I am Mac Engel here for Cowboys Overtime on StarTelegram.com. Let's get into it. The coach who was going to be fired last offseason, or was thought to be fired that was the prediction last offseason, was Mike McCarthy, was on the hot seat and was going to be replaced by Sean Payton. Obviously, that didn't happen. Cowboys finished 12-5 for a second consecutive season under Mike McCarthy. Now, however, we venture into an offseason of uncertainty. Do you trust Mike McCarthy without defensive coordinator Dan Quinn? Mike McCarthy's first year, the Cowboys finished 6-10, and his defensive coordinator was his good friend, Mike Nolan. The Cowboys defense finished 27th overall that season, and after the year, Mike McCarthy was basically advised to find a new defensive coordinator. So he brought in former Falcons head coach Dan Quinn. Now, it should be mentioned that in that 6-10 first season under Mike McCarthy, Dak Prescott missed 11 games with a broken ankle, but the defense was still terrible. Then in 2021, Dan Quinn comes in, so does Micah Parsons, and the Dallas Cowboys have a top 10 defense. They again had a top 10 defense here in 2022, both of which this season and last season, again, the Cowboys finished 12-5. Now Dan Quinn is one of the hottest assistants on the NFL head coaching circuit cycle. He's been linked to the openings in Denver, Indianapolis, Arizona, and I think Carolina too, which has also requested to interview Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. Clarence, I'm under the assumption that Dan Quinn is Dan gone. Do you think there's any way he's not going to be a head coach sometime here in the next couple of weeks?
No, I think he's going to be a head coach. There's no question that he should. He's up for jobs in Indianapolis, Denver, and Arizona. And he's going.
Is he not on the? Is he not on the Carolina list?
I think Kellen Moore's on the Carolina list.
Okay,
I don't think Dan Quinn's on. He may be. He's up for jobs everywhere, as he should be. Yep. So I think that most likely he's going to get a job this time. He probably should have got a job last year. He's going to get a job this year. I will ask you this, and I like Mike McCarthy. I think he's done a great job leading his team to 12 wins back-to-back years. The only year he didn't lead his team to 12 wins to a playoff, the year that Dak Prescott missed 11 games. But there's a thought process that the best coach on the staff is Dan Quinn.
You can make that
argument. Back in the old St. Louis Rams days, they told Dick Vermeil after winning the Super Bowl, bye-bye, because we're not going to let Mike Martz go. And Dick Vermeil went to Kansas City and became another successful coach, but they told him bye-bye we're not going to let Mike Martz go. Because with Mike Martz is that important to what we do.
This is an interesting scenario.
And it's should the Cowboys say bye-bye to Mike McCarthy to keep Dan Quinn, or do you trust that Mike McCarthy can keep this thing going without Dan Quinn? The question is, who is the defense coordinator if Dan Quinn's gone? Do you go to George Edwards? Do you go outside? Who carries this thing on to keep them going in the right direction?
I don't know, because to say that Dan Quinn has not had a noticeable, statistical, anecdotal, visual impact on that defense is crazy. I mean, you watched it. Mike Nolan should never had that job. And Dan Quinn came in with a clear philosophy and an identity of what he wanted out of his defense. And if you watch that game against San Francisco, that defense played really hard. Tank Lawrence was good. Micah Parsons was everywhere. Leighton Vander Esch was terrific. J-Ron Kearse is playing with broken bones and everything else. I don't even know who they had lined up at cornerback opposite Trayvon Diggs. And they balled out. They competed. They held that team to 19 points. If Trayvon Diggs doesn't drop an interception at the goal line, and he did, he just dropped it. That changes the game. I don't know. That's really hard because I think you do have to give Mike McCarthy credit because he's the head coach and that's the way it works. And if somebody said to me, you've got to make a choice, you're either going to lose Dan Quinn, who did a great job in Atlanta. I know everybody kicks him for, blowing that Super Bowl lead 28-3 against the Patriots, but Falcons hadn't been in that game in a long, long time. That had been one of the worst organizations in the NFL for a long time. And they were professional. They were good. They were good under Matt Ryan. They were good under Dan Quinn. They really were. He did a great job in Seattle when he was a defensive coordinator under Pete Carroll, had that Legion of Doom. I don't know how you move away from Mike McCarthy, but this one's going to sting because you're right. Do you bring in George Edwards? Do you elevate him? Do you trust him to do this? Do you go outside? You have to look at who Mike McCarthy knows. They've got some good pieces on this defense. They need some better ones. Man, I don't know. And if you look at what St. Louis did in letting go of Dick and promoting Mike Martz, I don't know if it was any better. You know what I mean? Mike kind of outcoached himself in that Super Bowl against the Patriots. They should have won. They didn't. The Tom Brady first Super Bowl win. Rams should have won that game, but they didn't because Mike got too cute and wouldn't run the ball. For me personally, I like Dan Quinn's style a little bit more than Mike, and that's nothing to say that what Mike hasn't done. Mike's done a really good job. I'd feel completely comfortable if they did that. I don't think they will, but I would feel completely comfortable if they did that because I think they're both very good at their job. And that's what the results said in the end.
But if they don't do that and keep Mike, do you trust this team could continue to improve and take that next step? That's what the question is.
When Dan was first hired, I remember he said, I like taking stuff and fixing it. And he did it. You can't argue with the results. Look how much better they were defensively. They won games because of their defense. I don't know. I really didn't like the fact that Mike McCarthy's first hire as DC was his buddy. And I know that's a buddy league. It's a nepotism league. And he hired his buddy Mike Nolan, and that defense was trash. And he had to be forced to tell him you're going to find somebody else. Well, do you trust this organization to find another Dan Quinn type? He's out there, whoever he is. I don't know. Because you're right. They're really vulnerable to taking a step back after 2 12-5 seasons. I'm not loving it. I'm not, because he's gone. I mean, an NFL team would be dumb not to hire him. And I don't know, man. That one really kind of scares me for this team. Do you think, I mean, let's just say, Clarence, let's assume Dan Quinn's gone. Do you think they promote from within?
I mean, I think they have to a certain extent, to try to keep what they have going. They have the players, they have the scheme. You hope that whoever you promote from within has learned and understand the scheme that Dan Quinn has put out there and continue to rock and roll, especially with Michael Parsons, and continue to go on. The thing about Dan Quinn is he continues to evolve. It's one thing to copy Dan Quinn, but can you create the things that Dan Quinn does on a weekly basis, yearly basis, and only Dan Quinn can do that. You can try to copy a scheme, but you can't take his mind. You can't keep his mind. And he
Clarence, you
is.
covered Jerry forever. Do you think there's any? Jerry talked all over the map last offseason. I'm sure he will again. Any chance you see that he tells Mike McCarthy, "We love you, Mike. Here's your money. Dan Quinn's my head coach."
I don't see it. No, I think he's been, he's going to be loyal, and he as much as people say he likes to change, he's also stubbornly loyal to his guys,
Yes.
especially the guys who've been soldiers for him and supported him. And Mike has not bucked him at all. Just like he was loyal too long with Jason Garrett for 10 years. I don't know how he stayed for 10 years, but and again, Mike deserves to keep his job. Let's just be honest about that. This is not about. Mike won 12 games, okay,
Yep.
back-to-back years. Took it to the playoff, done things that no one's done since the 90s. He deserves to keep his job. But, this is not about a feelings and deserved conversation. This is about what's best for the franchise going forward.
Well, let's go on to our final topic here on Cowboys Overtime, which is what do the Cowboys need to do to take that next step and get to that elusive NFC title game. Going to go over some quick names: Leighton Vander Esch, Ezekiel Elliott, Dalton Schultz, maybe Tank Lawrence, certainly Anthony Barr, potentially Jaron Kearse. Those are some names that may not be with the Dallas Cowboys in 2023. Tyron Smith, it's hard to envision them bringing him back given the injury that he suffered. And all he came back and looked okay. Like you said it last week or the week before, Tyron Smith ain't Tyron Smith anymore. Clarence, when you look at the needs of this team to sit there and say, if we do X, Y, and Z, that they can take that next step and get out of that second round and get to an NFC championship game and ultimately really contend for a Super Bowl, not just a divisional round spot.
I've been trying to answer that question every year for the last 26 years, 27 years.
What are we going to do?
Are
they close?
Yeah. We've been trying to answer that question for 27 years now. Okay, now it's year 28 next year when the Cowboys have not won the Super Bowl, got into the NFC Championship game. If they knew, it would have already been done.
It's a different. But hang on, it's a difference between knowing and unable to do it. Like you address the position, and then the guy just doesn't pan out.
Right. I mean, certainly there are things they need to address. They need more weapons. They have to get more weapons at receiver. They have to find a way to improve this offensive line. You say Tyron Smith is gone. There's a good chance he could retire, but Terrence still tore his ACL. He might not be ready for the start of the season. You still need a guy to play right tackle.
Yep, and he was good. He was really good.
So you still need a guy to play right tackle, and you don't have those guys on your roster. This offensive line is not what it was. This is not the offensive line of the Aikman days, or the offensive line of Romo days, the offensive line of the early Dak years. When it was one of the best offensive lines in years in the league. So they have to find a way to stabilize the offensive line. They have to get better receiver. You have to find a cornerback to play opposite Trayvon Diggs. You got to find a Trayvon Diggs and find a way to get him to play with more toughness. I mean, if he has to knock that ball away from Greg Kittle. Okay. So, I mean, I know everybody wants to blame the offense, and the offense didn't do this, but there were plays that were left out there by the defense that could have changed this game.
Two of them by Trayvon Diggs. And you know what?
By Trayvon Diggs.
The one thing, I'm glad you mentioned Trayvon Diggs. Everybody's killing him. Trayvon Diggs is really good.
Yeah.
The Cowboys aren't going to let him go. Any NFL team would want him, but you're right. We have seen consistently NFL teams went at his side in the run game because they know he doesn't want to do it. Well, okay. And in that one series, that decisive series against the 49ers, he had two chances to change the game. Two chances. You take away that play to Kittle, that changes that drive. Kittle makes the catch. I think Trayvon was going for the pick.
No, he wasn't going for anything. No, he wasn't going for the ball.
He was going for something.
No, he was going to not hit him.
Okay. Either he was going for the ball, he was trying to glance him with his right shoulder, and he whiffed. Kittle comes up with a huge
as minimal contact as I can.
Yes, and then the other one later in that
drive, right.
Later in the drive, ball hits him in the hands for a pick. Would have completely changed the complexion of that game, and that's why plays like that were there. And if you're going to play this razor-thin margin game, you have to make those plays. Right. They didn't. They lost. But when it comes to addressing the needs, we talk about what happens to Leighton Vander Esch was really good this year.
Right, but you can't give him a multi-year deal because you can't trust his health. But, you wouldn't want to bring him back. Anthony Barr, do you bring him back? I mean, Jonathan, you got to get a better
John
front. You got
Hankins.
to get real. Jonathan Hankins, the old guy who they brought in a trade to be the nose tackle. Do you bring him back? Certainly you need help at pass rusher still. You got to decide how you're going to play Michael Parsons. If you're going to be in, he's going to be a linebacker. He's going to do both. You still need guys to get up the field. Tank Lawrence is not going anywhere. He redid his deal last year. He's up for 2 or 3 more years. He's going to be here. He
should. He played good. He played really well.
He's not going to be here, but they have issues that they need to address. And again, you cannot take a step back in talent and expect to take a step forward in results. You cannot take a step back in talent and take a step forward in results.
But at certain positions, talent-wise, isn't anything going to be a step forward? Like you look at receiver,
but you have to take a step forward. Right? But last year they took a step back in talent, and yes, the defense was better, which helped them to get a better record or the same record. But the results at the end of the day were not enough because you didn't have enough firepower to get you over the hump.
All right, we've gone a little bit long. This has been fun. I'm sorry the season ends because I got to tell you, even though I'm supposed to be an unbiased member of the media, I really wanted to see the Cowboys get to an NFC title game. I moved here in 1996. It ended. The Cowboys won the Super Bowl in February of 2006. I moved here like 6 or 7 months later, and all they have done is what you've covered. And I want to see it one time.
You're the jinx because you moved here.
It's you or me.
It's
you or me.
Take that mantle.
Well, we have the conference championship games coming up on Sunday. And then that will be followed by a week off and then the Super Bowl. And we will stick around here on Cowboys Overtime. And I'm sure the Dallas Cowboys will be making headlines between then and now because they're the Dallas Cowboys. Clarence, has been fun. Enjoy your time off, I guess. And for all of your Cowboys coverage needs, be sure to follow us on StarTelegram.com. Thank you, Window Nation. We will see you next week.